Well, we're going to talk about our plans for the Premiership, but on the basis of that, get Ealing in the Premiership. Hello. In the week that Ealing shocked Saracens, Bar finally signed a 10, and how are the squads looking ahead of Super Rugby at Aotearoa 2021? But lads, how are we doing? Another week. Harry and Johnny have missed the hat memo.
It's just the lack of hairdressers being open. It's the only reason. Forced into it, really.
Well, you've still got another month and a half with no haircut.
I think I'm going to do my own tomorrow, and that could go one or two ways.
Cool. So, stay tuned for that. We'll do something for that, showing people that. As I said, we've got no Premiership on at the moment, and I don't have access to Premier Sports. It's the only streaming thing that I don't seem to have ownership of from somewhere, so I haven't been able to watch any rugby. The Ealing Saracens game was streamed, but it was confusion of whether I had to pay for it or not, so I missed that. But I've seen the highlights, and well, we're going to talk about our plans for the Premiership, but on the basis of that, get Ealing in the Premiership. If they can beat Billy Vunipola and World Cup winning Vincent Koch.
So I don't know if you know this, but Koch was injured in the warm-up.
Oh,
really?
Oh, okay.
I see. Okay.
Or at least pulled out in the warm-up.
So, have you seen the highlights of it? Or am I? Ealing like a 15-man driving maul.
They do. They really do. Fair play to them. It's a way of scoring tries. You've got to say that the Saracens' tries were slightly more convincing. And maybe Saracens would defend those mauls differently if it was a real game. But yeah, Ealing beat Saracens' fourth team.
Yeah.
After all, they all got banned at the Barbars game. I think they were missing 9 who got banned or something.
Oh, really? They still banned then?
Yeah, I think it counts as like it wasn't like a week's ban. It was games, a number of games they got banned for. So this was probably the first available game they had since then, I imagine.
Yeah, fair enough.
Ealing, well, it was mostly Jackson Red, wasn't it, who did all that stuff?
There were a few of them.
Yeah,
I can't remember the exact format.
There was a fair few. But yeah, Ealing didn't look too bad. Interesting stadium. It looks like a worse version of Newcastle Stadium.
So apparently they have a deal arranged with a West London football club for should Ealing be promoted to the Premiership, because there's a 10,000 supporter minimum requirement as part of the Premiership rules, which Ealing's ground currently doesn't meet. Apparently they have an agreement with a West London football club. Obviously not going to be Brentford because they're hosting London Irish. QPR could be quite fun. I know they are not exactly flush with cash. Fulham would be interesting. It's a bit further in, but their owner obviously has the connections with the American football, owns the Jacksonville Jaguars, and wouldn't be surprised to see them, if they had an interest in rugby as well, see them try and help Ealing out. A couple of balls kicked straight into the Thames could be quite funny, given how close Fulham's ground is to the river. Conversion attempts going into the rowers. But yeah, I think most likely QPR, which would be good for them, the Kian Stadium.
And as I say, I think, we can say all you like that Saracens had their academy, more of their youngster academy players out there, but you still got you got Welsh international when Alan Davies was playing, like Billy Vunipola was playing,
Duncan Taylor.
You've got an American international and Will Hooley playing. Yes, it's a championship-looking Saracens team. However, they've still won. And if you think, and we're going to talk about the plan for the Premiership in a minute, I'm just looking down at this, having a look at the overwheeling squad. obviously the big notable player they signed a couple of weeks ago was Bobby. Oh God, I've literally googled his name and he's disappeared from my memory now. But it's Bobby De Weir, I think it's the Bobby De Weir. South African second row is 24. They've signed him from, I think, from the Cheetahs maybe, but I could be making that up. But anyway, he was linked with a couple of Premiership sides. Worcester, apparently, he'd been in advanced talk with Worcester, so he's clearly thought of. Just looking again, they've got Charlie Walker, ex-Quins. They've got Guy Thompson in their side. They've got Sean Moulton, who's been at Bristol and Exeter, the hooker. They've got Max Badilli, who was making good waves at Exeter at 15 and on the wing. You've got Dean Hammond, who's played a lot for Worcester, out on the wing. You have Barney Madison, who's played for Irish in the second row. And they've got a few other lads that have been kicking around, Ollie Robinson as well. Stephen Shingler, who's played for the Scarlets and London Irish as well, amongst others. So, yeah, Michael Van Vuren, who was at Northampton as well, the prop. Like, they've got some decent players in that squad.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that their squad is, when you think about what Newcastle have done, coming up with a squad that has a few internationals and a few players who are significantly above Ealing's level, but how well Newcastle have played and how competitive they've been, it's certainly not beyond the realms of possibility that Ealing come up with this squad and this coaching setup and are competitive, if not great.
And I think knowing that apparently their owner has a fair bit of money, he probably, like, if they did come up, he then would maybe splash a bit more cash on some big players like Newcastle.
Yeah, once they're actually guaranteed to be in the Premiership, then they would.
So we're basically, while we're on this, is sort of a topic for sort of filling this podcast here is the rugby paper sort of not confirmed, or they sort of went down the line that the ring fencing's become a thing. Obviously, it's been a contested debate with COVID-19 and the unfairness of the league and the legality of it. And Harry might want to talk about the legality of it because that's what he likes doing. But we thought we'd just come up with our plan, sort of a 5-year plan for the Premiership. Anyone like to go first with their ideas?
Do an idea at a time.
Probably, what aspect of the plan has everybody focused on? I know I have focused on competition format and a way to get these 14 teams into a season. What about you guys? Mine can be quite. I've got 5 bullet points to mine. Okay.
So I've got a 5-year plan. You go 3 years of lockdown, so 3 years of ring fencing. Saracens and Ealing come up, so you've got 14 teams. You play the same sort of format as the top 14. The bottom 2 teams, because of the extra number for Europe, the bottom 2 teams have to qualify for Europe, the Challenge Cup, by playing Krasnodar or a Romanian team or something like that. At the start of the 4th year, so the 4th cycle, relegation's brought back in for the bottom side, and that gives 3 years then to Cornish Pirates and Doncaster, those that have got a bit of cash in the Championship, to get established squads together. I would keep the top 4 the same. I had an idea potentially you could look to do something similar like the top 14 do when you have a top 6 playoff, but top 4, because at the moment they're playing too many games as well, so just keep it to the top 4. I would bring in the 50-22 rule from Super Rugby AU with the kicks to encourage a bit more attacking rugby, especially in the first 3 years when we haven't got the relegation. So losing is not the end of the world. And I would also, to deal with the pressure of, I've noticed in the last few weeks that you've got concussion replacements which bring players in and off. I would also add an extra substitution, or have a concussion sub, or just have an extra sub on the bench. How you can work that to enable to prevent basically more injuries. So you've got you can have a full front row, like decent, basically a whole forward pack, because again you've got 2 extra games, and that's what I would leave it as at the moment. That was my initial plan.
Very interesting. So briefly on the on the playing front in terms of, well, would you like us to talk about your points or do our proposals?
Do your proposals or whatever.
So
Don't mind.
My structure was, in the end, it seems to have been, if not consciously, almost directly cribbed from the current Pro 14 structure, where, although slightly reduced, where we split the whole 14 teams into two conferences of 7 teams. This can be done however you like. It can be regional, to start with at least. It can be regional. It can be based on league positions previously. So team who came first goes in Conference A, slot 1. Team who came second goes in Conference B, slot 1, etc. And then you play your conference home and away. You play every team in the other, so that's 12 games. Every team in the other conference, either home or away. So that's another 6 games for each team. And then because one of the issues that comes with this playing somebody not home and away is that you lose a bit of the rivalry stuff. What the Pro 14 have currently done is they have 3 rival matches per season. I'm going to have that to just 2 because there aren't that many massive rivalries in English rugby. Like there are Gloucester, Bath, and sort of that little southwest quadrant. But then otherwise there's nothing that intense. Maybe Leicester, Northampton.
Yeah.
Not so much these days. Especially with no fans. It doesn't really make any difference if there are no fans there. And then the playoffs is a bit more interesting. So the winner of each of those conferences, it's all done regular, 4 points for a win, bonus points for 4 tries. You win your conference, you come second in your conference. Because everyone's basically playing effectively the same level of competition. You've not played necessarily the same teams, but it's turns out effectively the same level of competition. So first of all, you have 2 semi-finals. Number 2 and 3 in each conference play each other. And then they go to what's called the conference final, where they play the winner of their conference again. So the first of those games, the semi-finals, are at home for the number 2 placed team. Conference winner, the conference games are at Twickenham because the RFU need the money. And then the winner of the 2 conference games, winners of the 2 conference games, play in the final again at Twickenham. There you go. So in the end, what happens is there are 20 regular season matches, which is down from 22, which is a good thing. Too many rugby matches being played at the moment. But then we have an additional playoff match for places 2 to 4 in each conference. So there's about the same amount of rugby because the 4th team in each conference, they play against each other. The winner gets a Champions Cup place. The loser goes into the Challenge Cup. And then we end up with 7 and 7 in each European competition. So most teams will play between 21 and 22 games. The winner of the thing overall will probably play 23. A couple will play 20. Done.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Because the big burden on particularly the teams that end up in the weaker teams that end up in Europe is there are too many matches. So we don't want Ealing playing 35 games a season.
No.
So we need to try to reduce the number of games that they play.
The conferences could look something like this. I just sort of was putting it together like geographically and a bit of a mix up. So you could have one conference could be Newcastle, Sale, Northampton, Leicester, Bath, Gloucester, Wasps. So you've still got the Northampton, Leicester derby and the Bath, Gloucester derby, which is good. And then you've got more of a London-based conference of Saracens, Ealing, Quins, Bristol, Exeter, Worcester and Irish, which means you still get the Quins-Irish battle. Saracens don't really have a rivalry with anyone. But you can have a Bristol-Exeter rivalry, which is starting to get a bit bigger.
Yeah. There are all sorts of options. You could start to generate within these conferences. You could start to have a conference rivalry developing because if they were fixed, you'd play the same team. The issue with them being fixed is that you play the same teams in the playoff every year. So it affects, like, I don't know if you can enable the screen sharing, Johnny. I've got a sort of draft plan as well. But basically, I've got one conference has Saracens, Wasps, and Bristol in it. They would come top 3 in that conference every time because the others are Quinn, Irish, and Gloucester.
You're saying Irish aren't going to come top of the conference?
I am saying.
And the other thing I would do, just to add to that, is probably a given: scrap Anglo Welsh Cup, because it is the worst thing known to man.
Or just run it as an academy club cup.
Well, no. See, my thought would be is if you're going to ring fence the Premiership, you've got to give something to the Championship and say you can have all our academy people unless we recall them for an injury replacement.
You might have to have a thing of, like, I've sort of said before about having dual registered players.
Yeah.
And I think you would have, like,
I've had it one season where we sent 4 people to London Welsh, and then it was in the contract if someone got injured, we could recall them. So I actually think we sent off Chris Cook and we recalled Chris Cook, which was bad bit of business. But
I do think the issue with that kind of, where it's almost I'm not even sure what you would call it, but a sort of affiliate system where a Premiership club is the overlord of a Championship club, is that those Championship clubs have their own identities as real clubs. Like, you don't want Richmond being like the whole history of Richmond Rugby Club just turning in Harlequins kids.
Yeah, I guess you have to balance it, like limit it to an extent.
But it could be, you've got to have a bit more of a loan format. So you could have there's no harm in having a loan format. Like, for example, TG Ione he's still contracted at Irish. He's still got another year on his contract, but Irish didn't need him. He's gone to Glasgow on loan. And and if we can bring him back if we need to. But at the moment, we don't need him.
The problem with the loans, though, is that like TJ Ioane's salary at Irish, he would be, and also at Glasgow, he would be easily, I suspect, the best paid player in the Championship. So the loan system works in football because the lower paid players in the Premier League, for example, are paid sort of the same level as better players in the Championship, in the second division. But in rugby, the pay disparity between the top division and the Championship is so big that some, like in the Premiership club, if they're paying TJ Ioane's wages, they want something out of that. Basically, they want someone available to play at the drop of a hat or be there useful in training.
I mean, TJ Ioane's not the best example of someone. You might go with, like, someone a bit younger, like, I don't know, like, and again from Irish situation, Ben O'Donnell, Jack Cook, these guys that could do with playing week in, week out because they're good players. Like Seb Nagle-Taylor, yes, he's broken into Gloucester in the most recent weeks. That's really down to injury. But again, he's another guy that's come out of the Hartbury system that would benefit from playing week in, week out at Hartbury.
But still, their wages are, from knowing what we know about the pay of non-Premiership professional players, like Premiership academy contracts are decent for a Championship player. It's towards the upper end already for not a great player in terms of what the Championship club are getting. So they're not going to want to cover that whole. You basically need England Rugby to subsidise those loans somehow, because England Rugby benefits from those guys getting match minutes.
And also you could build up some kind of support for the Championship, which I think is, if anything, if you close off the Premiership, the Championship are just going to look like, obviously a lot of them were never going to play in the Premiership anyway, but you could just drop off completely the support for it, where actually if you kind of...
What support?
Yeah, true.
The Championship is not a thing that has people coming to it because they dream about being in the Championship. Like even Ealing this season, Ealing had almost the lowest average attendance, I think, and or at least the season just gone, and they were the second best team in the league, and nobody was going.
I would say with the Championship's another re point, but again, because you lose 2 teams out of that, you just make that into more of a Super Rugby AU, Super Rugby Aotearoa competition. Where it's a short, condensed season where you might start it in March, and then you can run it through where it's a bit more, I don't know, when it's the weather's nicer or something like that, where it can be a bit more attractive. But as I think Harry's the nail on the head. Like from when I used to go watch Richmond when Richmond the Championship, and I've seen them play against Doncaster on a Friday night, and I've seen them against Cornish Pirates. Compare those games for the attendance when Bristol came with all their megastars, and when Irish came the year later. The crowd, they sold out Bristol. They had about 2,500 for both Irish and Bristol, but Doncaster, you're barely filling in a stand of a couple hundred people. So,
no, that's the real difference between. There are really 13 professionally supported rugby clubs in England, and then Ealing have professional finance, and then there's everybody else. Like the attendances you get in National 1 are comparable to the attendances you get in the Championship. It's
steering this back on, Joe and Johnny, anything you'd add to either Harry's or mine things? Would you bring any rules in? What was the rule? What was the rule about bonus points from Super Rugby Aotearoa? Was there a bonus point rule that they couldn't get a bonus point if something happened? Was that a thing?
I think the one thing I would potentially do with all the South African teams joining the Pro 14 or 16 or whatever it's going to be, is I would contemplate moving it if you could, but then you'd need the French to move it, French to kind of move their league if Europe was going to work. But given that the South Africans are going to be playing teams, a lot of them are going to be playing in the same calendar period as the Irish teams and the Scottish teams, the Welsh teams, you might as well move it all. And then it will probably make it easier for summer tours in the bit in between to match up with the Southern Hemisphere. And I think if there is a time to move it, do it now. Don't do it a few years down the line. If you're going to do it, I don't know whether it's the right decision, but if you're going to move it now.
That'd be moving it. When would you move it to?
Probably have it start in January if it's going to be 20 odd weeks.
We should basically just run everything parallel worldwide. Because Super Rugby starts in early February as well.
Yeah.
And it's short. It's a bit shorter though, isn't it?
The Premiership could start 3 weeks
earlier.
Super Rugby, maybe a month before Super Rugby. We basically have first 8 months of the year is club rugby, 4 months of international rugby. Like that would be great if they could only get organised to do that, and they might do with increasing amounts of private equity money. I don't know if any of you read that Silver Lake, I believe, US investment fund, are buying a pretty large stake in the All Blacks commercial arm. So not the All Blacks as in the organisation that picks the team, but the All Blacks, the company that sells
the brand.
The brand, basically. So the more organised, basically, the more money comes in that's not old boys in blazers, the more likely it is to get organised, I think. Whether or not it's a good thing long term, the money coming in is a question, but it does mean we're more likely to get to a proper organised global season, I think. It's a really interesting time to be interested in rugby.
Yes.
There's a lot. Speaking of while we're doing laws and while we're not doing actual rugby, an NFL game was ruined by 2 high tackles last night, and the best player in the league has potentially been knocked out of the rest of the playoffs by being knocked out. Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs. And
Oh God.
it just shows how well, actually, I know the litigation is happening, but really how well rugby is doing with head injuries, because any rugby fan watching that thinks, oh God, at least rugby's not that bad. And like rugby is definitely going to benefit from its positioning towards concussion. It only can, because everyone else is worse, frankly. Football is only just a concussion substitute. Premier League starting it from next week, the week after next. But even then, not really acknowledging it.
Yeah, because it seems like American football is the first to acknowledge it, but hasn't really done much about it. They've brought in some stuff, but they've kind of did their initial bit to keep everyone happy, and then they've not done anything, and it's gonna bite them in the foot at some point. But
so the real, so there was both the Mahomes getting knocked out, but then the secondary thing, normally if you effectively knock the ball on in a tackle and it goes out of play, your team keep the ball, and that's the clock stops. Your team keep the ball. If it gets knocked out of your hands in the end zone, or knocks out of your hands sort of and then rolls through the end zone and out, your team lose the ball. And that, whether that happened, that scenario, is reviewable by the TMO effectively. But the high tackle equivalent, which is a thing they call targeting, where if basically the defender hits the attacker in the head with his helmet, that's not reviewable. So they spent 5 minutes reviewing whether the ball had rolled out of the end zone. Every replay showing the defender hitting the attacker, and basically the reason that the ball got knocked out is because he got knocked out. Like, the ball got knocked out of his hands because the defender knocked the guy out. And they just kept showing the replay of this with no sanction to the defender. It's terrible.
That's bizarre.
Yeah. Because that's not reviewable. That's
Jesus.
Yeah.
What's the point of having things you can't review?
Who knows? To be fair to them, there are so many things that would probably take the whole game. But that's not a good. That doesn't justify it. It's really.
I think that kind of sums up, doesn't it? That one of the what should be reviewable, the things that are most important really are players' safety and rules regarding that. And if they're more worried about where the ball rolled out than whether the guy is conscious, this probably shows you where they're at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's really bad.
But,
I think rugby are doing well for that.
And this situation, as I say, with obviously it's brought a halt to a lot of people's lives and etc. But it's a great opportunity to rebrand the game, rebrand rugby, make it more attractive, sell some more rights, do that. Like the game, as I say, it's not a world game like football is, and it's not drawn in the pat, and it really could do that. And I think as much as I've always been a big fan of having the relegation because it provides that competitive element. However, I'm sat here going, my team is potentially going to get relegated. I don't like seeing London Irish get relegated 3 times since I've been a fan of them. It's not very nice. I'd much rather know that I can go in and go, I don't really care. We're not going to win the league, but I'd quite like to know that we'd stay up, and let's see how competitive we can be this year with a decent young players. Same with like Gloucester have talked about in the relegations, like Worcester again. Like generally, if like those teams go down, they're not going to survive, are they? So it is really important that they are going to.
And that's why I think like the structure Harry's proposed is actually like a very good structure, and especially if you moved it into one compact period, because like Super Rugby is the only thing going on, and everyone looks forward to a big Super Rugby game every year. The one thing that really annoys me with the Premiership is you have a few games, you have your November internationals, you lose some of your best players, you have a few games over Christmas, a little break, then you have Six Nations and you lose some of your players, and then you kind of finish off the season. So it's always in kind of like, and like if you're a team that has a good lot of internationals, you can just be stuffed for like 4 weeks every season. I mean,
Anyone
Bath lose like quite a few players, and especially when they don't have great depth in some players, it just buggers us every season, and you can't build any kind of like I don't know, consistency in the teams going out every week, which Super Rugby does.
Yeah, there's no momentum in following the narrative. The narrative of the season is what gets people excited, and I think it's possibly why European rugby is. I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, personally, I'm more interested in the Premiership, but generally, the European rugby is better followed and a bigger deal, both because it's just the nature of the competition. You're playing teams from France and teams from Ireland, etc., and it is the pinnacle of club rugby. But it all happens in a much closer period of time. There are 2 blocks of group games, and then each of the knockout rounds are played home leg 1 week, away leg the next week, a couple of weeks off, and then it really keeps that momentum much better than the Premiership, which has 4 games of your full team, 3 games of your full team minus your internationals, 2 games of your full team, 3 weeks off for the Six Nations. It's just the flow of it doesn't work at the moment.
I mean, this is another.
To be honest,
it's another argument for another day. But I'd love Europe to be a knockout,
just straight knockout. Yeah,
because it would like you put your best. Because again, like take Gloucester, take Quins, I don't know, take Bath for example. Like they're out in Europe after 2 weeks. Like there's no one wants to see Clermont beat someone 50-0. Like. And then they've got to play again. Like, just do a straight knockout. Gloucester's best team versus Clermont's best team. If Clermont win by 20 points, fine. You've had a crack. But you just get that would bring in some really high. That would be like, right, guys, Six Nations sort of vibe of let's go knockout, straight knockout. Can we get like more of like an FA Cup type feel, but for rugby, like. We all know how much people like watching the FA Cup. Like
the issue with that, and it's been actually similarly the downfall of the FA Cup, is that the way, say you're Heineken, bad example. Say you're the Champions Cup organizer, whatever that's called, EPCR, and you're going to BT or Sky, or BT and Sky and Amazon and Canal Plus and all of those broadcasters. There are way more matches played and way more things to broadcast and slots to put advertisers in if you have the current system where people play loads. There are loads and loads of repeated games. That straight knockout system is like great as a way of condensing a lot of teams at the start to a winner, but it really cuts down on the amount of TV money you can get in. That's probably why. So the Football European Cup is what it used to be, and then they created the Champions League in the 90s, I think, maybe late 80s, because that's exactly at the same time as TV money was becoming a big deal.
The other thought that I've had, and it's sort of going off the back of that, and again, I don't know if this would necessarily work, just hypothetical thinking. I really like the idea in football, and it works more because you've got, I think, a better quality across more countries in Europe. Of when I supported Villa loads when I was younger, and football was my main sport in like the 2010s, and Villa were getting into Europe. It was awesome because we weren't a European football club. Suddenly we're playing in Europe because we've qualified, because we've come in the top half of the season, top half of the league. I've always thought it's a bit strange in rugby that if you're in the Premier League, you're playing in Europe, and it's a given, rather than actually earning the right to play against the best teams in Europe. So you could almost have that, I don't know, top 4, and then 2 or 3 places, 2, 3, 4 places below that. And maybe that's too many, but you could do it that way and qualify for either the Heineken Champions Cup or for the Challenge Cup. And then it's like the Champions League runs on the Europa League group stage knockouts. It's less games in the current system. It's perhaps a bit more exciting because you're you're really qualifying for something rather than just being put into competition A or competition B. I don't know.
I think that would also work because actually there is, like, even in the Champions Cup places, which is what is it, seven or eight at the moment. Like, there is a disparity between Exeter and Quins getting into the Champions Cup. But if it was Exeter, Wasps, Bristol, I don't know who else off the top of my head, but like you had like a very small kind of niche group, every game would be competitive in the Champions Cup. When you have a pool of four now, if you're a top team, you know 2 of them are going to be probably pretty easy when you go and play Scarlets or something, or one of the Welsh teams, or you go, and then it's actually a bit more competitive.
Something like that.
Obviously, as you can probably guess, my answer to that is it's because you can put more games on the telly.
Yeah.
But this year, the Challenge Cup, or the year just gone, the Challenge Cup hasn't been on TV.
No.
BT bought the rights for it, but then never actually put it on, or maybe Sky bought the rights for it in the UK.
No,
there's no way of watching it.
Got the rights.
Which
yeah. Sorry, go on.
Well, no, it was just to say that the later stages of the Challenge Cup are good fun. Like the Bristol Toulon final was as good as any game in the Champions Cup.
Oh yeah.
So I don't necessarily agree with the cutting it down, as in the number of teams who qualify for European competition, because like I think it's fantastic that London Irish have a fixture against Poe. That's like why reserve that? Because there are not a lot of rugby fans, but they're all, certainly the match going fans, are very passionate, and you can get 2,000 London Irish fans to go to Paris or Montpellier, probably not Montpellier, but to go to somewhere in France to watch a match, actually. Maybe not 2,000, but 1,000, which is more than most football clubs could get. So let's not get rid of that, but create a tournament format and put it all in one block of time where there's a sort of you keep excited about one thing and then you get excited about the next thing. Rather than this disparate structure where nobody really knows what's like. My dad, for example, is a moderate follower of club rugby, has absolutely no idea whether there's going to be a game at the weekend and whether that game is going to be European. And he's like, he must be reasonably representative.
Definitely.
We don't really know week by week because of the fantasy rugby. Otherwise, what match is on this weekend? Are Quins playing Bristol or are they playing Poe? Like it's really hard to keep track of, which is unnecessary.
Yeah.
They also need to do probably some better advertising, because I knew that the Dallas Mavericks were playing the Chicago Bulls last night. Do I watch that much NBA? No, I don't. But I knew that they were playing because of the strong advertising that Sky put together.
Yeah, and similarly,
BT is just a little bit in there, but you get like some like Conor McGregor style promo of Mara Itoje going up against some, I don't know, Carl Sinclair or something. I don't know, like that. Just make it a bit more American, because that's where
it just needs some more money and sponsorship.
But one thing that really wouldn't take very much money, because we've all seen that it's free for us to play. Video games are enormously successful at promoting promoting a sport to people. Very expensive to make FIFA, very, very cheap to run Fantasy Premier League, in terms of the overall attention that the Premier League gets from people, and having that investment and knowing more players and caring more about more teams and being more like. I've watched far more rugby and far more football because of my fantasy team than because of the teams that I support.
Yeah.
Like just in the quantity, never mind caring about it, just paying attention to it. We've seen from the fantasy the fantasy rugby that we play is free. It's not great. They've struggled with their servers this year, but just get European rugby to put a bit of money into it, a couple of €100,000 a year. Bang, there you go. That platform will exist, and people love it. People love fantasy sports.
Yeah.
Have a betting angle on it because that makes loads of money for the organizer. It'll be so easy. Even Formula One has a fantasy system now.
Yeah.
Because of how successful it is. Formula One is not conducive to fantasy
No,
sport.
it really isn't.
No one scores any goals.
Oh, that's great. I didn't hear that.
Pit stop time. I'll get a pit stop time. I'll get the Red Bull pit crew.
You joke, but yes.
Yeah.
Like genuinely, you get points for literally anything you can measure. But rugby's a real sport with a ball. Like, there's no excuse. There's just no excuse.
What as I've brought to Americans, what would you say to us like rebranding the teams? Like Wasps obviously got rid of London Wasps. You could easily get London Irish just be called the Exiles. You could get Warriors just being called Worcester being called the Warriors. The Trailfinders are called Ealing are literally just called the Trailfinders most of the time. Bath, I have no idea what you call Bath.
Stay Bath.
The Romans, I don't know. Gloucester Lions, like I don't know. You've already got Leicester Tigers. You've got Sale Sharks. They would just be called the Sharks. They're pretty much the Natal Sharks anyway, because they've got the Duprees, so they're already the Sharks. Like you've got the Falcons. Like that might bring in more. But that's got the netball. That's what in netball. That's definitely netball's a completely different thing. It's a lot lower than most but however that the Super 8 has definitely had a bit more injection because they've changed the names to a bit more jazzier things. You see it in cricket with the Big Bash, like
and the 100.
Yeah.
Cricket. Personally, I don't think it's necessary, but don't know anything about marketing. I think the teams as they currently are have sufficient nicknamey, mascotty.
Yeah, I just think you need to advertise the clubs more.
Yeah,
people don't. You need to build a kind of image of each club, which you don't really get with many of the clubs. Which other sports they're a lot better at. Naturally, just the whole branding all around, and I think it's got a lot better generally at clubs and the amount of merchandise and stuff like that. Not that that's necessarily a big thing, but that's definitely improved compared to say 10, 15 years ago.
I think the big thing in different sports is that certainly in cricket, they didn't have those names. So Somerset's just Somerset County Cricket Club. Warwickshire's Warwickshire Cricket Club. So that is a bit of a mouthful, not very exciting. So they change it to Birmingham Bears, Somerset Sabres, whatever it might be. The rugby teams already have that. They already are the Tigers, the Saints, the Lions, Quins. So I don't think they need to change the names. So a lot of them have changed their badges recently, and that's part of it. So really, it is just the advertising of it, I think.
And taking kit more seriously. I know Bristol are obviously starting it, and Quins have historically, but think about how much attention Stade Francais get. Now, obviously, they have a lot more history in their kit, which gives them the sort of leeway to be. They have a history of being interesting, so they have a bit more leeway to be interesting in the future. And similarly, Bristol have quite a sort of. They're not a big. They haven't been a big name forever. They've been a medium name with a fairly standard blue and white striped kit, and you can do a lot with blue and white. You can't really change the stripes of Leicester Tigers a great deal, but you don't have to make it look like a Fox's Glacier mint. Like, take that seriously because it's again similar to the fantasy sports, similar to the games. It's a way into people caring about you. Like you'll see Bristol kit at public gyms because it's.
Oh, honestly, I just walking around Bristol now.
Well, yeah.
Every fifth person wears a Bristol Bears hat. I hate it. It's great for Bristol, but it's. But actually, definitely, and you can tell with Bristol they've done it well because they've actually just engaged the general populace so well. Like Bristol City are the ones who've had the ground. They've been a staple of that, of sport in Bristol, basically, for the past 20 years. Bristol have just done it well very quickly, and I just think they've got such good support across the general populace that it's great.
Yeah, no, they've done really well.
That's I think that's exhausted that sort of topic. While we just finish off a little bit on the Premiership, or shall I let Harry summarise?
Exeter have to change their branding.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Long term, they just have to do it.
Yeah. They can be. I don't know what they could be, but
like literally, could Chiefs just be Celtic Chiefs? It would be fine. There were loads of Celts in that part of the country. Just from some other random part of the world.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Exeter because they've lost Thomas Francis. He's gone to Ospreys. We were talking about that week before about who they might replace him with. Not really giving anything away, but Thomas Francis is off. Good, probably a better move for him because he's not really been getting in that Exeter team as a starting tight head. And at least he can go to Ospreys to be the starting tight head and hopefully nail his Wales tight head roll down for the next World Cup. So good move on his part.
Yeah, well, it's mandated by Gatland's law, isn't it? It's coming up for contract extension, and he has to choose between accepting a competitive contract in Wales and playing for Wales, or turning it down and not playing for Wales. So as soon as one of the Welsh clubs showed an interest in him, he would have to go. But Ospreys are looking better this year. Not a terrible place to be forced to move to.
No, Toby Booth's doing some good stuff down there.
Yeah, you'll have to see how they do post
COVID.
Stephen Myler. Well, yeah,
Stephen Myler. Yeah, well, they've got what's his name? Oh God, it's gone. They've got the New Zealand lad there, but he's Welsh.
Anscombe.
Yeah, but he's been injured for a while.
Yeah, so we'll see. There was a video of him running the other week, so he's on his way back. And obviously the ridiculousness of this season means that the time that he's been injured has passed quite quickly. Well, sort of quickly, and sort of as slow as any year has ever been. But yeah, when he's back, hopefully there's not too much gap between Myler hitting the wall and Anscombe being back at full power.
I'll have a 10 on 10s. Ian Keatley, who's had his contract terminated at Treviso, signed for Glasgow. So that's good for Glasgow. Replacing, they're linked with the Munster lad Healy, which they may or may not get. They probably should get him to replace. They need someone to replace Hastings, but they've
got Duncan Weir as well.
Duncan Weir, I was just about to say Duncan Weir. That's a really good pickup. Shame for Worcester, but I would say Worcester have been hammered in the last few weeks with signings. But that Duncan Weir one's a good pickup for Glasgow. Kieran Brooks, not confirmed, but he could be off the Toulon, which would be great for him. Shame for Wasps, but great move for him. Glenn Young and James Lang are leaving Quins for Edinburgh, the lock and centre respectively. Good moves probably for them to get in for Scotland anyway.
Yeah, good moves for Harlequins as well. Two guys who are on somewhat significant, particularly Lang, somewhat significant contract to then not be available during the international periods, as we talked about. It's just completely debilitating for the team. They lose all sorts of benefits from people being England qualified, or at least available to be picked for England. So you lose that, and you lose them for the Six Nations period. They are way less attractive as an asset for the club to have.
Yeah.
Again, an issue of the current structure, because they're both good players. The Premiership is better for having James Lang and the second row. Is it Glenn Young that's moved?
Yeah, the second row. Yeah.
The Premiership is better for having them in it, but Quins have basically been forced to give them up because the current rules mean that they're basically not quite useless, but significantly less useful as squad members.
Well, before we get to the big Bath reveal, which you may not have seen, Gabriel Ibitoye obviously left Quins at the end of the year. Bit of a profile move to Argen. I don't think he really looked at Argen's form before he moved for them because they're terrible. So he's left Argen midway through the season. He signed for Montpellier, which he probably should have signed for in the first place. Good move for him.
Good move for him. It sounded like the coach wasn't too happy with him at Agen. Said he basically hinting that he wasn't putting in the effort, but I think it's tough when I don't know. I think they've played 12 games and lost 12 games or something like that.
Yeah, they are struggling.
I'd like to see him do well, given that he's made the big move to France.
14 played 14, lost 14.
Ooh.
Minus 323 points.
Oh God. That really is bad.
They've got 2 points. But in what I've just looked at the top 14 is that Montpellier are 13th.
Are they?
Yeah. So he's literally gone one club up.
Well, Andre Pollard's been injured.
Yeah.
And they've really got a great, weirdly, for a French club, they haven't got a great up and coming 10.
Yeah, but Bordeaux, we got a 16-0 draw at the weekend against Clermont. So we stay 6th or 7th. 6th. We're 6th.
Yeah, Morgan Parra is still kicking around in that game.
Yeah.
He's still ticking. He's still pretty good. I saw some highlights. He still looks pretty good.
But let's get to the hand over to the resident Bath player. We talked about, not Bath player, Bath fan, I should say. We talked about
if only.
half. It's been rumoured for a while, but Tian Showman has signed.
Yeah, good signing. I think he may offer some creativity to that Bath backline that's needed. Priestland's off to Cardiff, so makes sense. He's only signed an 18-month contract though.
Oh.
So whether it's long term, I'm still hoping on Marcus Smith as our first choice, and then he's just there to offer a decent second choice because we haven't had 110 for a while. We might as well have a very decent one and a pretty good one as a second choice. But yeah, and he's already in Bath. Apparently, he's going to start training with Bath tomorrow. Yeah. So I don't know. Give him 2 weeks.
For the next game.
He'll be starting.
Yeah, I think It remains to be seen whether he is necessarily exactly what you need.
Yeah.
Given his level of experience. But the main issue that we highlighted with Priestland is that he is absolutely no running threat, really. Schumann is the opposite of that.
Yeah. And I think that's like especially
with... he doesn't run. Now, it probably won't be great for the sort of touches that McConaughey and Watson, etc., get, but it'll be good for the pack and probably good for the team overall, just to get more momentum early on. And then you have a few sort of secondary playmakers, or Scoman makes the break and then you play off Spencer. That's quite good. That works. And Redpath is a decent distributor.
Yeah, I think it could work, especially going into the summer more. Play some more summer rugby might be all right. And of course he is a former Bordeaux player, so he's clearly got some class about him. But I think it's not like the signing the big signing that we're going to get Andre Pollard or someone. But actually, I think it's pretty kind of decent signing that we needed, because he basically means that we got 2 10s to play now, where it was Priestland. And it has been since Freddie Burns left. So actually, he's technically Freddie Burns' kind of replacement. So can't complain at all.
He is. He just needed to fly off. I mean, I was half expecting you to sign Ian Keatley, which would have been a perfectly good filler, but that you just need to fly off. With all due respect, I really like Josh Matavesi and I love him at 12. he's great, but he's not a fly half. You just needed a spot. You just needed an extra strength and depth for fly half. I think we'll sort of leave it there for the Premiership.
There's one more rumoured fly half signing now. Have you not heard?
Oh, no.
Danny to Newcastle for the rest of the season. Sips.
That could go one or two ways. They'll either win the Premiership or it'll be a disaster.
Well, I think he'll probably do all right there, to be honest. I think the biggest thing about Cipriani is his own motivation. And I think that's what's been lacking recently at Gloucester, is he clearly doesn't want to play for us anymore. And so now he isn't. So maybe he will want to play for Falcons for a little bit. Who knows?
Well,
He needs a job, not anything else.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Possible.
Don't know if you'd like it up there. It's a bit cold.
Everyone's cold at the moment, isn't it?
Cold up north.
Yeah.
Right, that's part one done. Thank you very much for listening. Come up for part two when we're going to talk about Super Rugby. As I've got 2 big transfers in Super Rugby, as my beloved Crusaders are going to pick up one of my favourite players of all time. So come back for that.